I'm a big believer that primer depth consistency needs to occur no matter what depth you are priming to. And every time I've done a priming video, the Duraco PCPS comes up in the comments. So I finally got my hands on one and I'm gonna see if it lives up to the hype. Let's take a look. And here's what we're talking about, the PCPS and the PCPS Lite. Now, on the surface, they basically are the same looking tool. Very, very similar. They're clearly machined using the same specs. There's just differences in the materials, how they're finished, and a couple other things. So let's start with the PCPS. Now, the PCPS obviously has the color anodized parts. You can see it has the color anodized pickup tube, the shuttle, the insert, all of that. And then also there's more stainless steel on the PCPS. And so it's a little bit heavier unit. It's got a little more heft to it. It's also been completely coated. So a little bit more there. You've also got the micrometer on the bottom so that you can easily make little click adjustments to your seating depth. Overall, it's a really great unit. And then we have the PCPS Lite. It's definitely a lot, it's definitely a lot lighter. It is a little bit more aluminum than stainless, and it is not colored in any way, no color coding. Your shuttles, your pickup tubes, everything's gonna be just, you know, plain aluminum looking. And there is still some stainless steel, but not nearly as much as in the PCPS. But other than that, they're going to function the same. No micrometer, of course, too. You can see here, this is no micrometer. But in terms of the shuttle operation, how they prime, the consistency, they are all going to be very, very consistent. And I can tell you the PCPS versus the PCPS Lite, in terms of consistency at the end of the day, they are the same. It's just how you get there that's gonna be a little bit different. One other thing that I should note, and Duraco is really good with this, is that they give you a really nice little spare parts kit right here. And they did this with the Ugly Annealer, if you saw my review on that. And they really seem to put the customer's experience, they put it ahead a little bit compared to some other companies in terms of giving you little extra screws. There's actually an extra return spring, a return spring clasp, or whatever you want to call it. There's a bunch of different screws in here. So if you drop something, you lose it, whatever, have no fear. There's probably a replacement part in here, at least for the first time you do it. So I do think that's pretty impressive. Price-wise, the PCPS, so the anodized, heavier, more stainless version with the micrometer, is gonna run you 200 bucks. And the PCPS Lite, which is the more aluminum, no micrometer, no color anodizing, that's gonna run you right about 80 bucks. Of course, that's as of I'm making this video. There's no telling in the future, but they've pretty much been that price for quite a while, so I don't see that changing too much right now. So how do we set these up and how do they work? I'm gonna walk you through the PCPS, which is sort of the big boy unit here with all the adjustments. And then the PCPS Lite, it's going to be largely the same. I'll just show you just the very minor differences in how you're going to set it up. So let's get started. Now, I already have this one set up. This is my large rifle, and minus a couple little adjustments for seating depth, it's pretty much ready to go. So what I'm going to do, I have a second PCPS, and I took the head off of it and just pulled everything out so that you could see how to get this set up. And what you're gonna do is you can use the included Allen wrench, or of course, if you have your own Allen wrenches, what we're gonna do is we're just going to unscrew one side of this. Now, one thing to keep in mind, they really thought ahead on this because they didn't want you having to remove the whole plate. You can leave this dangling on here. And the reason is there is a little indent on each side. So it doesn't matter which side you take off, but you just turn it 180 degrees like this. And now we can drop in the appropriate, again, this is small rifle, but I'm just showing you for setup. There's a little pinhole there, there's a pin there, it's gonna drop right on. And what we wanna make sure we do before we do that is obviously put the shuttle on. So we are going to drop the shuttle on. You want it to be captured by that pin. We're then going to drop this one on top, and then we want to take a shell holder. Now, the shell holders that it needs are these stemless, you can see they're just flat on the bottom. And Duraco makes a really great set that you can pick up. I've been using these for quite a while on some other projects that I've done. And anytime I need something without the bottom stem, these are what I'm grabbing. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to show you how this drops in. Now, you remember there was that little cutout on the side here, and that means that you can drop in the shell holder without having to remove this entire plate. You're just going to make sure that it's set, and then we're going to bring this back over here. We're going to put the screw back in, and we're going to tighten this back down. Now that we've tightened these screws down, you can see the shuttle works just fine right here, but we need to put the return spring on. Now on the underside, there's already a little clasp, a little screw with a little clasp, and we're going to, or a little hook, I should say, and we're going to take the spring and we're going to stretch it out just a little bit, and we're just going to get it captured. So now you have a return spring. And that's all there is to it. Now this is all set up and it is ready to go. And all we would do in that case is, if we look at how this part is made, it's really simple in that there's the body die here, and we just want to make sure that we put in the correct seating stem. This happens to be the large rifle. Everything is really well labeled with the Duraco stuff. There's giant L's and S's on everything. We're going to drop the fat end down into the tube, and then we're going to screw our head back on. And I just get it nice and snug, and then we're going to tighten it down. The PCPS Lite is going to be the same exact setup. You still have the same return spring under here. You still have the same capture plate. You're still going to put the shell holder in. You're going to make sure everything's working smooth there. But again, there's no coloring, so just make sure that you are looking for the L's on everything. L, L. You know, there's L's everywhere that you're going to need. And then it has the same setup inside here. So you've got the stem that you need to choose large or small for, and screw it on and you're good to go. Now that you've seen how to assemble it, let me show you how this works. The actual act of priming is going to occur because we have this anvil that is down in the shell holder here, and it is going to be pushing on the bottom of this seating stem. So that's going to push up through, okay, and that's going to come up here, and that's going to actually seat the primer that's been shuttled forward. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to grab a piece of brass. Now I know this is close. I have, in setting this up for the video, I have messed with the micrometer a little bit, so it's not going to be exact, but that's okay. What we want to do is we want to set this up just like we would set up a sizing die. We want to get it close. So we're going to put a piece of brass up top. We are going to lower the ram, and then what we're going to do is we're going to manually adjust that body die until we get what we feel is a good reaction between where I want to pull the handle and where the ram is coming up. Now there's no real right answer for this from what I found. I found that I could adjust it so it was really high up, and I would have to come much further down on my handle pull, and that's where some people like to give it some leverage. Some people want to leave it a little bit higher up here, and you can certainly set your die a little bit lower, and that's going to leave you a little bit less pull. The point is you want it to be comfortable because you want to be able to pull on it consistently so that you are seating with the same force. You don't want to, you know, have it somewhere where you're jerking or slipping or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and shuttle a primer in here. We're going to go ahead and seat it. And now using my handy dandy primer depth gauge, we are going to test it. Now you can see here it is seating right about 8 thousandths. Okay. So 8 thousandths from flush. So that's the face of the base of the brass to the top of the primer. There's an 8 thousandths gap there. And you might hear some people say, oh, I load, you know, 3 thousandths or 5 thousandths or 12 thousandths below flush, but that does not tell you the whole story. And that's really important to understand because primers are different depths, primer pockets are different depths. So how do we determine where our below flush number should be? I'm going to walk you through that little process here, and then we're going to make the adjustment on the primer seating so that we get to that point every time. First thing we need to do is determine how deep is the actual primer pocket. Now I can use, I've got, you know, a couple fancier tools for this, but really a set of calipers is all you need. So I'm going to show you how that works. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use the bottom stem here. We are going to take our piece of brass and we're going to make sure it's going along the wall, not the center of the brass flash hole. or the primer pocket, because we don't want to have a bad reading because of the flash hole in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and take a reading here. That says 130. Okay. And what I can do if I want is I can rotate the brass a little bit. So like 129 on another side. Let's take another reading here. So this one's 130 and a half. And then if I turn it 180, 130 and a half. And we'll do one more for giggles here. So 130. And we'll turn it and do it again. 129.5. All right, so we're going to say 130 because that's just an easy number to work with right now, and it's right in the middle of everything. So 130 thousandths is the actual depth of my primer pocket. So that's how deep it is. Now we want to know how thick are the primers. So I already loaded up the primers I had in the tube here. So I did grab a couple more just so that we had them without pulling them out of our pickup tube here. And so I've zeroed out my calipers, and now we're going to simply use the jaws to just lightly grab, okay? We're just going to lightly grab the primers. That one's 120. So this one's 126 and a half, 126.5, 126.5, 127. I'm not sure why this other one's a little flatter, but that one's definitely lower. And you know, it's another argument for another video of whether we should be sorting primers or not. But you can see here, these are all coming in right at basically 127, 127 and a half. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to grab a calculator. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do some simple math. We have 130, so 0.130 for the actual primer pocket, okay? And then we are going to subtract 0.127. Now, obviously, most of you can do the math in your head. It's gonna be 3 thousandths, okay? But it could get a little more complex than that depending on the numbers you have, so I'm just showing you the process. So we know that there is a 3 thousandths difference between the thickness of the primer and the primer pocket itself. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there is a 3 thousandths air gap between, if I were to seat the primers flush to the top here, right? So if I seat the primers flush, then there's going to be a 3 thousandths air gap under the primer before the flash hole starts. And I don't want that. I don't want any air gap in there where a flame is wasted or there's a different burn rates going on and not everything's going down the flash hole. I want real consistent flashing coming through to my powder, which means I want that primer to be at least touching, if not just a hair crushing. And because you have primers being seated, because keep in mind, a primer can be seated slightly angularly depending on your seating that you're using, depending on how the primer pocket is uniformed, if it is at all, if you have any buildup on one side. So your primer may not be perfectly square in there. And you have primers that have maybe slightly taller walls before the anvil or the cake, or the anvil might be sticking up a little bit. So there's a lot of little variables there. So for me, I want to have that primer touching, and then I want to crush it about 1 or 2 thousandths just so that it is consistent. Now, you're probably saying, well, what happens if you crush it too much? Well, if you crush too much, you can end up breaking that primer cake that's in there. So it's a compound that's put in wet and then it dries and it can crack. So if you think of like really dry dirt where you see like a crack in it, that's kind of what can happen, or cake. If you have a cake that's too dry and you break it, and it's going to have a little seam in it. And that can definitely lead to some primer issues as well in terms of inconsistencies. Now, everybody's going to have a different philosophy on this. Some people say I should just seat to flush and don't worry about the air gap. Some people are going to say you want to just touch. Some people want a very heavy crush. You know, some people want to shove that anvil all the way into the cake. There's a lot of different ways to kind of attack this. But here's the thing. The method I showed you at least lets you consistently determine what you are doing with your primers. Now, in my case, I'm going to want the primer to touch plus another 1 or 2 thousandths. So I have 127. I'm going to need to take up that 3 thousandths gap plus another 1 or 2. So we're going to call it 4.5 or 5 thousandths below flush. And I hope that makes sense to everybody. So I know that this one, when we seated it, was 8 thousandths below flush. And I'm going to move the micrometer. Now, one thing to understand about this micrometer is that it is a metric micrometer. So it is not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's just under, I think it's just under half a thousandths. Don't quote me, but it's because of the clicks. I want to say it's just under half a thousandths per click. So you'd want to be about 2 clicks, give or take, per movement. So we are 8 thousandths, which means I want to come back down about 3 thousandths. So that'd be roughly 6 clicks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Really nice detent clicks. If I wanted to, I could get under here and look at it. There are numbers on it like you saw, but I really don't have to because I can just go by feel. So now we're going to shuttle another primer. And we're going to go ahead and measure. So there we go, 4.5 thousandths. Okay. So that is where I want my primers to be. Your mileage may vary, but for me, I want 4.5 thousandths below flush because that means I am crushing 1 to 2 thousandths, ensuring uniform contact with the face of the primer pocket without potentially damaging the cake. And again, I might get flamed for this in the comments, but that's how I do it. And I've had very good luck with that method. Now that we've done that, we've got, what do we got? 4 pieces of brass here. So let's go ahead and see what the consistency looks like. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to set these down right here. In fact, I'll just hold them in my hand. Do I have another one? No, that one's already been seated. So I have these 4 pieces of brass. Let's just see what that looks like. So what do we got? 5 thousandths. Okay. 5 thousandths. Sorry, sometimes this isn't the easiest thing to do. For some reason, this one's being a little bit stubborn on the rim for some reason. I don't know why. Okay. 4.5 thousandths. And I don't know why that one was having so much trouble, but I'll tell you what, just so there's no question about what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and, you know, I always try to be as honest as I can with this stuff. So we're just going to seat another one right here. And that one's coming in right at 4 thousandths, okay? And, you know, just for fun, I'll do another one here. So no primer. Four and a half thousandths. So there was something sticking out on that rim that was having trouble with my gauge here, but you saw that I was able to bring in a bunch of extra pieces of brass there, and it is just dead consistent. 4.5, 4 thousandths right there every time. And, you know, and I'm even doing it in a slightly awkward way because I'm trying to film it. If you're in front of your bench and you're really, you know, taking your time to go through it and load it, you're going to be just a hair better than I am. But for me to do that much brass that quickly on the side at 4 to 4.5 thousandths, I think that's pretty amazing. And, you know, it's everything that I want out of a primer. Now, obviously, you saw that I was using the micrometer to make those adjustments as I was getting it seated up. If I'm using the PCPS Lite, the only difference is that I would have to loosen this lock ring, and then I would need to move it up a little bit. You know, if I wanted to, I can move it up or down to increase pressure. But really what the manufacturer says is that you're going to end up seating by feel. For the most part, because this may not be square with where you want to be. You might get lucky that you can adjust it, you know, a certain amount in front of you, but really without the micrometer setting, there's a limit to how much you can actually adjust there and still have it in your, you know, in your direction where you can safely load each time. After that, it's going to be more based on feel. But I will say, if you get this set, moving it as you would a seating die, and you can get it where, you know, where you're getting it to the depth that you want, then the seating is dead on. I mean, you pull, it hits, you're good to go. Does everything that the micrometer setting does. you know, it's again, 80 bucks versus 200 bucks. It is one of the little trade-offs like I told you about with the light that you're gonna have to consider. I really am sorry that I didn't get to it sooner because I understand the joy of using this. In fact, the rock chucker setup that you see here is pretty much what I have set up all the time, because if I'm ever doing any small batch testing, anything where I need to just maybe do a seating depth test on my primers, or I need to just prime up a little bit of brass, it's not practical for me to go and load up my auto system. And so it's a great way to do small batches. I've also taken my auto system, and let's say I want to load, you know, like I said, 4.5, 5 thousandths below flush. I can set up my auto system so that it is basically at flush, and then I can finish them off on this where I'm getting an even more consistent seating depth on the primers. And I do know people who actually do that right now. And then for anybody who is just looking for a price conscious, whether it's the $80 or the $200 system, it's really hard to beat this. And you know, you will need obviously to have a press. So if you have a rock chucker sitting around, or a partner press, or you know, any other small single stage presses, it's going to do a great job. And things like a summit press where you have a top down system instead of a bottom up ram, it's not going to work because there's too much with the linkage and stuff getting in the way of the whole shuttle system and everything. So that's not going to work. And obviously a progressive is not going to be the place for a system like this either, because of the fact that you need to have the anvil and you've got a lot of parts, and it's just not made for an auto system or any kind of progressive system. You know, at the end of the day, it's just a system that works. It's repeatable. It gives you great results. It's smooth. It's well made. Like, I can't say enough about it, and I honestly mean that. It's surprised me every step of the way that I've been playing with this thing since the beginning of the year, and you know, it just does the job that you're asking of it. So that's about all I have to say on it. I hope you are having fun reloading, however. I know I do. I hope you do get a chance to go out and shoot, enjoy yourself, and as always, I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk soon. Thanks.